I'm Beverly, sitting here in our new, cozy brownstone, surrounded by the gentle patter of rain against the windows. I can still feel the weight that has been lifted off my chest. It's been a while since that fateful day when everything changed, and I'm finally ready to share my tale. It all came to a head on that particular afternoon. The sound of high-heeled shoes clicking against the hardwood floor was like a death knell. My mother-in-law, Penelope, walked in as if she owned the place, not even bothering to knock. "I brought a notary," she declared, dropping her fur coat over the chair carelessly. "Let's get this over with." I glanced out of the corner of my eye at my husband, Christopher, standing beside me, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles were white. But Penelope looked right through him, her eyes fixed on me with a cold determination. I took a deep breath and replied steadily, "No need. You won't be needing those papers." Her perfectly plucked eyebrows furrowed, a tiny crack in her composed facade. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "Sit down," I said calmly. "We're going to talk about family the way you like to." She hesitated for a moment, perhaps sensing the newfound strength in my voice. Then she sat, her designer handbag resting beside her like a shield. I slid a folder across the table, just as she had done with the divorce papers a few days ago. "What's this?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Documentation," I said. "You should appreciate that it's your favorite kind of truth." Christopher looked at me, confused, but I didn't break eye contact with Penelope. "You accused me of using your son, of treating him like a servant. You've called me a leech, a meal ticket, a burden. So, let's review the math." I opened the folder page by page. Rent every month for 3 years, paid from my account. Groceries, utilities, his health insurance, and even your expensive spa treatments last year. I paused for a moment. "Remember the luxury cruise your book club went on? You bragged about it non-stop. Well, I paid for it." Her face turned ashen, the color draining from her cheeks. "That's preposterous. Christopher sends me money every month," she stammered. "Yes," I said. "Money that came from our shared account. A line in the budget labeled Mom." She turned to Christopher, desperation in her eyes. "You didn't tell me that, did you?" Christopher swallowed hard. "I didn't want to embarrass you, Mom." She blinked rapidly, her eyes darting between us. "You expect me to believe this? That you've been paying for everything?" "You don't have to believe it," I said softly. "You can read it." I slid the receipts toward her. The neat columns, the printed statements, my world reduced to cold, hard proof. She flipped through the pages with trembling fingers. The silence in the room grew thick, heavy. Her breathing hitched. "You made me look like a fool," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did that yourself." Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "You think this makes you better than me? You think money buys respect?"
"No,"
I repeated, even slower, but lies cost it. Christopher finally found his voice, though it was barely steady. "Mom, stop. Please. This isn't about sides anymore," she glared at him. "She's poisoned you against me." I leaned forward. "You did that all on your own, Penelope. Every demeaning comment, every hurtful dig, every threat. You wanted to control him, to make him choose between peace and your old-fashioned pride. And when that didn't work, you tried to shame me into leaving." Her lips trembled, but her tone was still sharp as a blade. "You're heartless. You think keeping everything in order makes you right. You don't love him. You just use him for your own status." For the first time, Christopher raised his voice. "Enough." His palm hit the table, the sound echoing through the room. "You don't get to talk about love. You use it like a weapon." The shock on her face was palpable. She froze, her eyes wide. He continued, his voice shaking but clear. "She's never tried to control me."
"You have."
"You treat me like a child, even though I'm a grown man and her husband. And I'm done watching you tear her apart just because she doesn't fit your idea of a perfect wife." Her eyes filled with fury, not remorse. "She's taken you from me." I stood up, gathering the folder and sliding it back toward me. "No, Penelope. I didn't take anything. I gave. For years, I've supported this family financially and emotionally, and I never asked for gratitude, just basic respect. She stared at me, breathing hard. You think you've won? There's nothing to win, I said. I'm done playing your games. Christopher stepped closer to me, his presence a silent show of support. Mom, it's time for you to go. Her expression crumpled into disbelief. You can't mean that. I do, he said. We both do. The words hung in the air, final and irreversible. She stood up slowly, gathering her bag, her eyes sweeping the room, the framed photos, the warm lights, the life she had always tried to control. At the door, she paused. You'll regret this. I met her gaze. Maybe, but it'll be my regret, not yours. When the door closed behind her, the silence was vast. Christopher exhaled deeply, as if he had been holding his breath for years. I should have stopped her sooner, he said. You just did, I replied. He reached for my hand, the same hand that had once signed those divorce papers meant to destroy me. We had moved here 3 weeks after that confrontation. It was a smaller, quieter place, but it was ours. Christopher, who had always had a passion for gardening, found part-time work managing a local community garden, the same place where he used to volunteer on weekends. I, on the other hand, reduced my client list and started leaving the office before sunset. My sister, Olivia, was the first to visit us in our new home. She dropped by with a bottle of wine and some Italian takeout. So, she said, grinning, that finally blew up. I smiled. Not exploded. More like a meticulously planned operation. Word spread quickly. Penelope's friends stopped visiting her after they realized that the once powerful Penelope had been wrong about me. And one of her nephews, Daniel, stopped inviting her to family events after she tried to lecture his wife about the proper way to run a household. Penelope now stayed in her large, lonely mansion, sending us polite texts on holidays. Christopher replied with short, careful words, while I didn't reply at all. As I sat there in the living room, watching the rain, I couldn't help but think about how it all started. Christopher and I had been married for 3 years. We had a unique marriage. On the surface, it may not have looked like the typical relationship. Christopher was a creative soul. He loved cooking, and he spent his days running a small art studio downtown where he taught local kids how to paint and draw. He was the warmth, the soul of our home. I, on the other hand, was a high-powered financial analyst. I worked long, grueling hours, often up to 70 hours a week. My job demanded precision, silence, and results. I was the structure, the one who made sure our bills were paid and our future was secure. For a long time, it worked. We were happy, content in our own little world. But then, Penelope decided that our marriage didn't fit her mold. Penelope came from an old money family. Her father had been a prominent businessman, and she had grown up with a very traditional view of what a marriage should be. She believed that a woman's place was in the home, taking care of her husband and children, not climbing the corporate ladder. I would often hear her opinions second-hand through family dinners. Her friends would give me awkward glances, and I could tell they had been filled with her stories about how Christopher was being used by me. Christopher always tried to shield me. She just doesn't understand modern marriages, he'd whisper, squeezing my hand. But I understood perfectly well. I knew that some women, like Penelope, could never forgive another woman for achieving what they had never had the courage to pursue. Olivia was the first to notice the tension that followed me home. You flinch every time your phone rings, she said one night over a pizza. I shrugged, pretending it was just work stress. The truth was, Penelope called me almost daily, reminding me of all the things a good wife should do: host elegant dinner parties, bake homemade bread, and smile demurely at Christopher's every word. I had managed to handle every crisis at the office with ease, but I was completely unprepared for the constant battle of trying to please someone who was determined to dislike me. Then, Daniel's wedding invitation arrived. Christopher was thrilled. It'll be great to see everyone again, he said. A chance to start fresh. I smiled, even though I was already bracing myself for the storm. Penelope called the next day. A 5-star resort on the beach, she boasted. All family, no excuses. I promised we'd be there. I even went out and bought a designer dress, a soft, flowing silk in a delicate shade of pink, something she couldn't possibly criticize. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that peace might be possible. But fate had other plans. 3 days before the wedding, just as dawn was about to break, I was jolted awake by a searing pain in my stomach. It felt like a knife was twisting inside me. Christopher found me on the bathroom floor, sweating and shaking. The emergency room was a blur of blinding lights and beeping machines. The doctor's words were a jumble: stress, induced ulcer, at least 5 days of rest. I could only nod, too weak to do anything else. Christopher squeezed my hand. "I'll let everyone know. They'll understand," he said. I believed him, even though a small part of me knew I shouldn't have. On the second day in the hospital, I was sitting up with N4 in my arm, trying to catch up on some work on my laptop to take my mind off the pain. That's when Penelope walked in, her overpowering perfume announcing her arrival before her judgmental eyes did. "You look fine," she said. "You're sitting up and working." I told her that the doctor had strictly forbidden travel. She waved her hand dismissively. "If you can work, you can attend. Stop embarrassing this family." I pressed the call button, asking the nurse to remove her. As she left, her heels clicked down the hallway and her voice echoed, "If you don't show up tomorrow, don't bother coming back." I lay back, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding through the morphine haze. I didn't cry. I didn't call Christopher. I just stared at the 4-line and wondered how much more I had to endure before someone saw what she was doing to me. When I finally came home from the hospital, I expected it to be a haven. But the air in our apartment was cold, colder than the hallway outside. Christopher met me at the door with flowers and a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, Penelope was sitting at the kitchen table, her posture perfect, as if she owned the place. Her designer coat was hanging neatly on the chair beside her, and her expensive handbag was on the floor, a symbol of her dominance. "Mom wanted to stop by," Christopher said quietly, as if trying to excuse the situation. "I can see that," I replied. My voice was steady, even though my legs were still trembling. He helped me take off my coat, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and brought me a bowl of soup, chicken, and vegetable, my favorite. He was trying, I knew that. But the smell of the soup made my stomach turn when Penelope cleared her throat. "We need to talk," she said, pushing a manila envelope across the table. I knew what it was even before I touched it: the color, the thickness, the weight. "What is this?" I asked. "The next step," she replied. Christopher frowned. "Mom, what's in there?" "Clarity," she said simply. "If Beverly wants out of this family so badly, let's make it official." It wasn't until the edge of the paper brushed my hand that I saw my name typed across the top, a petition for dissolution of marriage. My pulse started pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. "You brought divorce papers to my house?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I brought them to save my son," she replied coolly. "You made a promise at the hospital. You said if you didn't show up to the wedding, you'd leave. I'm just helping you keep your word." Christopher stood there, frozen, his eyes darting between us. "You went to the hospital?" "She was fine," Penelope said quickly, exaggerating as she sat upright. I set the papers down gently. "I was on intravenous fluids. You saw the machines. You heard the doctor." She tilted her head. "If you were strong enough to argue with me, you were strong enough to attend the wedding." The silence in the room was so thick that it felt like it could snap at any moment. "Mom," Christopher said, his voice shaking, "this is insane." Penelope snapped back. "She's turned you into her doormat. You cook, you clean, and you follow her every whim. What does she give you?" "Nothing but an empty social life and a tax break." Something inside me shifted. That helpless ache that I had carried for so long was replaced by a quiet, burning anger. I looked at Christopher. "Do you believe that?" He shook his head immediately. "Of course not." Penelope laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "He doesn't have to believe it. Everyone else does." I stood up, my body still weak, but my voice firm. "You came here to humiliate me. Consider it done. Now leave." She smirked as she gathered her coat. You'll regret this silence, Beverly. The door closed behind her, like a final nail in the coffin. Christopher ran a hand through his hair and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know she'd go this far." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Penelope's smug face as she slid that envelope across the table. The pain in my stomach from the ulcer was still there, but this was a different kind of pain, a pain that burned away the anger and left me with only one thing: resolve. Christopher sat beside me on the couch, his head in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this," he said quietly. "You don't," I replied. "I do." He looked up at me, startled. For the first time in our marriage, he saw the woman who had always calculated the outcomes in her job, the woman who never backed down from a fight. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and started going through our household spreadsheets. I printed out every bill, every wire transfer, every expense I had paid since we got married. The mortgage, the car payments, Penelope's shopping sprees. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the truth. Numbers don't lie. People do. I stacked all the papers neatly in a folder. No shouting, no threats, just cold, hard evidence. By noon, Olivia came over with some homemade soup. "You look like you're on a mission," she said, half joking. "I'm done being nice," I replied. She glanced at the pile of paperwork. "What's the plan?" "I'm going to give Penelope what she wanted," I said. Clarity. When Christopher came home, I told him calmly, "Your mother is right about one thing. We do need to set things straight, but not her way." He looked exhausted, scared even. "What are you going to do?" I smiled faintly. "Tell the truth. All of it." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The fear was gone. The silence that I had once used to survive was about to become my most powerful weapon. The next evening, Penelope called, demanding to discuss the divorce papers. I told her to come over. My voice was flat, steady. She thought she was walking into a victory. Little did she know that it was an ambush, built on years of evidence and silent suffering. As I sit here now, looking back on it all, I realize that sometimes the quietest battles are the most powerful ones. Penelope thought that her words and her demands could break me. She was wrong. Silence was just the time I needed to gather the strength and the evidence to fight back. And once I did, there was no going back. We've found our new normal, Christopher and I. We've built a life based on love, respect, and honesty. And I know that no matter what challenges come our way, we'll face them together, stronger than ever before.